All right, let's ride. You're watching Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports. I'm Chase, and you're coming your way on today's show. Some Eagles rumors on James Bradberry. If he gets cut by the New York Giants, should the Eagles pursue him as cornerback number 2 opposite of Darius Slay? And also, following the NFL draft, we cooked up a list of 5 cut candidates, including some very notable names currently on this Eagles roster. We start off with James Bradberry. So a very fascinating situation between him and the New York Giants. Has a cap hit this upcoming year of $21 million. And back a couple years ago when he was signed by New York, when he was formerly with the Carolina Panthers, he was a very good cornerback. But at that price tag, he's not worth it. And with this new regime of new general manager Joe Schoen, head coach Brian Daboll, all indications are that the Giants are going to cut or release James Bradberry. So if that's the case, should the Eagles pursue him? Because right now, they don't have that bona fide number 2 cornerback who's playing on the other side of the field from Darius Slay, because Steven Nelson, who I actually thought played pretty well last year under an affordable contract, is no longer on this football team. And if Bradberry does get let go, you can sign him to a contract that is pretty team-friendly at this point of his NFL career. Now, he's getting paid by the New York Giants like a number 1 cornerback. I don't think he's that number 1 cornerback. I do think he can be a solid number 2. You take a look at the numbers over the last couple of years. 2020, 2021, 15 games played. Thought he's a really solid player, right? When he was targeted, gave up a completion percentage of 61.5. Targets to receptions, pretty solid there. 3 interceptions, 18 pass breakups, only surrendered 587 yards and 4 touchdowns. But as you can see, 2021, 2022, the last couple of years, completion percentage up. Targets and receptions up because opposing quarterbacks no longer fearing him. Interceptions up, certainly, but the pass breakups down and yards way up. So too are the touchdowns. Now, when you look at the Eagles' defensive back depth chart right now, I love Avonte Maddox as a nickel. He's way too short to play outside cornerback as your starter. Darius Slay coming off arguably the best season of his career, obviously the best year that he's had in the Midnight Green in his 2 seasons in Philadelphia. Zech McPherson, I like the draft pick back in 2021, but is he ready in a very lethal offensive era in the National Football League to be a starting cornerback opposite of Darius Slay? I don't think so. That's where James Bradberry enters the equation. And I like him as a number 2. I don't like James Bradberry as a number 1 cornerback because I think his best days are behind him. On his current deal, when he has that aforementioned cap hit, it's way too expensive for the player that he is right now, which is slotted as a typical number 2 corner. But if you're able to get him off the scrap heap after being cut by the New York Football Giants, you can get him at a pretty team-friendly contract, and I think he really fits well at that secondary cornerback role because Darius Slay is going to be tracking the opposing team's number 1 wide receivers. Next up on the show, much anticipated top 5 Philadelphia Eagles cut candidates following the 2022 NFL Draft. But first, I want to hear from you in the comment section. Hashtag Where's Mott. You can comment that certainly down below, but also get your votes in right here because I want to get your feelings on James Bradberry. Do you want the Eagles to pursue him if he does get let go by the Giants? G for get, P for pass. Sound off and let me know in the comment section. We pivot now to the top 5 Eagles cut candidates. This Eagles roster has to be one of the deeper rosters in the NFL following the draft. I love the depth that Howie Roseman has been able to build. And as part of that, some players are going to be on the outside looking in. So without further ado, we get to our top 5 list of the Eagles cut candidates, and we have to start in an obvious era with JJ Arcega-Whiteside. His era with the Eagles, I think it's going to come to a close at some point soon, and I don't think that they really need to move forward with him on this roster. What's interesting is that, yes, he's a big-bodied wide receiver who at Stanford jumped off on the tape because he was able to be that jump ball wide receiver and red zone guy. He's now converting to tight end after he was a failed wide receiver. In 3 seasons since being a second-round pick, we know the story. He was taken ahead of DK Metcalf. I think Howie Roseman has made up for it by trading for A.J. Brown, but JJ Arcega-Whiteside has been a certified bust. 16 catches in 3 years. As a second-round pick, that ain't ideal. 290 yards and 1 touchdown. By cutting Arcega-Whiteside, Philadelphia would free up about $1 million on their salary cap. It's not a lot, but at this point, don't you want to free yourself of that distraction? It's time to cut your losses. JJ Arcega-Whiteside's elite trait as a wide receiver and now as a tight end is blocking. And as a second-round pick at that wideout spot, that's not good enough. JJ Arcega-Whiteside has struggled with drops, inconsistency, hasn't even been able to even break that rotation, and when he's been on the field, he's been awful. No separation at all. If he adds a little bit of weight because of that size and frame, maybe he could be a decent tight end, but you have Dallas Goedert. I like Tyree Jackson. You go with Grant Calcaterra in the NFL draft. For those reasons, I think JJ will be on the outside looking in. That's why he leads off our segment as one of our 5 cut candidates. Now, we're going to get to the rest of the list coming up here right around the corner. But first, make sure you hit that red subscribe button down below to subscribe to Philadelphia Eagles Now by Chat Sports as the #1 Eagles channel on YouTube. Our videos have been crushing. The views have been popping. We've been picking up subscribers like crazy, and a goal is on the horizon. Help us reach 30,000 subscribers. We're a little less than 1,700 people away from reaching that milestone. If you're watching right now for the first time and you're like, why should I hit that red subscribe button? Free daily videos, audience interaction, news, rumors, free agency updates, NFL draft coverage was just awesome this past week. So if you want more Eagles videos, we need more subscribers, and we're trying to get to 30,000 subs. By the time that Thomas Mock comes back next week, can we get to 30,000? Hit that red subscribe button to support the channel. Don't forget to turn on those notifications as well by hitting that bell icon. Therefore, anytime we do push out a video, you'll be notified. From one bust of a wide receiver in JJ Arcega-Whiteside to another in Jalen Reagor. JJ, a second-round pick. Jalen Reagor, a first-round pick. Once again, Harry Roseman has made up for those busts for trading for A.J. Brown. But with the acquisition of A.J. Brown, does Jalen Reagor, with the financial implications on his contract as a former first-round pick and him not being good at all in his first 2 seasons, does he have a spot in this wide receiver rotation? I think a change of scenery for him and the Eagles moving on from him would certainly be best for both parties. He's been terrible his first 2 years as a punt returner, as a special teamer, and most notably as a wide receiver. And right now, the Eagles wide receiver depth chart, it's pretty stacked. A.J. Brown is your one. Devontae Smith is your other one. Quez Watkins is your vertical threat. And I think by having A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on this team, it's going to free up some opportunities for Quez Watkins to really take the top off of the defense. You signed Zach Pascal in free agency. I think he's been an under-the-radar signing. I like Greg Ward as a slot receiver and another backup. So I think the Eagles pretty set at that wide receiver spot. And this picture behind the graphic for Reagor at the Meadowlands against the New York Giants when he had not just one opportunity to win the game, but 2 opportunities to win the game, kind of encapsulates his Philadelphia Eagles career. It was a crime that he went before Justin Jefferson, and since then, the numbers are certainly evidence of that. 64 catches in 2 years, 695 yards, 3 touchdowns, average yards per catch of nearly 11. That's 2 years as a former first-round pick who up to this point has been terrible. He's been a bust. He's been mentally fickle, and it's time for the Eagles to cut bait. Do you agree with me with that sentiment? Do you think that Jalen Reagor can rebound? And do you disagree with me? If that's the case on either side, it's your opportunity to really voice your opinions on Reagor. Is it time to move on from him? Y for yes, N for no. Let me know if it's time. Today's show presented to you by our sportsbook partner, BetUS. All year, they've been offering a 125% deposit bonus. If you plug in that link down below, chatsports.com/EaglesBet, and the promo code to my right, Eagles125. Now, the Philadelphia 76ers, in the midst of the NBA playoffs, in a 2-0 hole against the Miami Heat. First 2 games, they were bad. James Harden lacking aggressiveness. By the way, I host our Sixers channel, 76ers Now by Chat Sports. Subscribe to that. But going into Game 3, the series shifts back to the Wells Fargo Center. Doc Rivers saying after the game, not sure if Joel Embiid is going to be able to play. Miami Heat, road favorites, -1. The over-under set at 210.5. If you want to bet on this game or the NBA playoffs, NFL futures, plug in that link as well as that promo code. Number 3 cut candidate. We continue to stay at the wide receiver position because, once again, the trade acquisition of A.J. Brown has rearranged the chairs on the deck, right? John Hightower. I like his vertical element. I like his speed. It's been way too inconsistent, though. And if a roster spot came down to Hightower or Greg Ward, who would you pick? Hightower has a speed element in his game that I certainly think is intriguing, but Quez Watkins in that same draft class has really surpassed him to a certain degree, and I think he's the much better wide receiver. There's no question about this. Maybe Hightower makes the roster, maybe not. He will, and I know this, he will be fighting for a roster spot. He's firmly entrenched on that roster bubble. So speaking of that wide receiver battle, Greg Ward slot, John Hightower on the outside, maybe he can shift inside just a bit. If you're Nick Sirianni, you're Howie Roseman, and this Eagles staff and front office, if a roster spot came down to Greg Ward and John Hightower, who are you picking? GW for Ward, JH for John Hightower. Once again, voice your opinions in the comment section. Treat it like 94.1 WIP or 97.5 The Fanatic Sports Talk Radio call-in line. 2 more players to get to. We shift to the defensive side of the ball with this one. K'Von Wallace, the safety out of Clemson, who I think has been a good special teams player for Philadelphia, but at that safety spot hasn't really had ample opportunities to prove that he was worthy of that draft selection after a really, really impressive career at Clemson. The pressure is on K'Von Wallace to have a good training camp. Has an opportunity to earn a starting role. He's going to be competing with Marcus Epps, barring any significant moves in free agency. As of right now, the most notable safety still out there on the open market, it's Jaquiski Tartt and it's Landon Collins. I think the Eagles want to move forward with younger players because they're cheaper and they're better players at this point. But the team really seems to like Marcus Epps. That's the coaching staff led by defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon on that side of the ball. And it's the front office with Howie Roseman, but also players are taking notice of what Marcus Epps has been able to do as an under-the-radar player on this Eagles 53-man roster. Darius Slay was asked about breakout players on the Eagles defense on Wednesday, and he went out of his way to mention Marcus Epps. He said it's his time. For sure, Marcus Epps is a player to watch. He got a lot of reps. He filled the role really well. He's also always been ready, always been waiting for his time to come. I'm looking forward to seeing what he could do. And I think the Eagles are pretty confident in Marcus Epps. Otherwise, they would have made more of a splash at that safety spot, either in the NFL draft or in free agency. That is going to be one of the marquee training camp battles. Wallace against Epps. So who do you think is going to start? Do you think it's going to be Epps? Do you think it's going to be Wallace? I think a lot of fans are rooting for Wallace, and I like the player. I just think that Epps is a guy who is kind of on that trajectory to starting, but it's your opportunity to be a part of the show just like I am as the host and predict who will be the starting safety in this Eagles secondary. Lastly, LaRaven Clark. Yes, he is a depth piece along this offensive line. He's actually a former third-round pick of the Indianapolis Colts a few years ago. And the Eagles did let go of Nate Herbig, who probably could have been on this cut candidate list if they didn't release him. And I think Herbig is going to have a lot of suitors out there, 17 starts over the last 2 years. But with some of the moves made throughout the offseason, NFL draft, this offensive line is pretty interesting with the addition of Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson now being the future guard. As for those tackle spots, Andre Dillard is one of the best tackles at that backup spot across the NFL as a former first-round pick. Maybe he is a trade candidate, but I think LaRaven Clark could be a cut candidate to free up a little bit of dough on the salary cap going into 2022. So there you go, our top 5 Eagles cut candidates. Lastly, before I hop on out of here, name an Eagle you think is on the hot seat on this roster currently. Share your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for making today's show a part of your day, Philly.